I'll never forget the sound of paper sliding across the hospital tray table. I had just regained consciousness after 3 days in a coma. My body was broken, tubes everywhere, and I could barely open my eyes. The doctor had just left the room after telling my husband the extent of my injuries: a shattered pelvis, 2 broken legs, spinal damage, and the possibility that I might never walk again. I expected Michael to be devastated. I expected tears, promises, reassurance. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "Sophia, I need you to sign something." When I focused my blurred vision on the papers in front of me, I saw the words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." My husband was divorcing me, right there, in the ICU. To understand how I ended up in that hospital room, alone and broken in more ways than one, I need to take you back to where it all began. I met Michael when I was 29 years old, working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. He was 32, a senior financial analyst with sharp suits, sharper wit, and the kind of confidence that made everyone in the room turn when he spoke. Our first conversation happened at a company mixer, one of those awkward networking events where everyone pretends to enjoy warm white wine and stale crackers. I was standing by the window, trying to look engaged while secretly checking my phone, when he walked up and said, "You look about as thrilled to be here as I am. Want to escape and get real food?" I should have been offended by his presumption, but instead I laughed. 30 minutes later, we were at a dive bar 3 blocks away, sharing a basket of fries and talking like we'd known each other for years. He told me about his dreams of starting his own investment firm. I told him about my plans to eventually move into brand strategy. We discovered we both hated running but loved hiking, both preferred dogs to cats, and both thought pineapple on pizza was a crime against humanity. The relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, we were living together in a small apartment in Capitol Hill. Within a year, he proposed during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands, getting down on one knee on a rocky beach at sunset, the wind whipping his hair into his eyes as he nervously fumbled with the ring box. I said yes without hesitation. Because Michael, at that point in our relationship, was everything I thought I wanted. He was ambitious, driven, affectionate in private, and proud of me in public. When I got promoted to senior marketing manager, he took me out to celebrate and told everyone we knew. When I talked about my career goals, he listened and offered advice. When I had a bad day, he'd order my favorite Thai food and cue up whatever mindless reality show I was binge-watching at the time. We got married when I was 31, in a beautiful ceremony at a winery in Woodinville. My mother cried during the vows. His father gave a toast about how proud he was that Michael had found a partner who matched his ambition. I wore a dress I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl, and when Michael slipped the ring on my finger and said, "I do," I believed with every fiber of my being that we would be together forever. The first few years of marriage were good. Not perfect, no marriage is but good. We bought a house in the suburbs, a charming craftsman with a big backyard and a maple tree that turned brilliant red every fall. We adopted a golden retriever named Cooper who became our practice child, our joint project in responsibility and care. We hosted dinner parties, took weekend trips to Portland and Vancouver, and talked about our future with the easy confidence of people who believe they have all the time in the world. But looking back now, from the other side of everything that happened, I can see the cracks that were forming even then. The small signs I overlooked because I was too invested in the life we'd built to acknowledge that the foundation might not be as solid as I thought. Michael had always been somewhat particular about appearances. He cared about what car we drove, what neighborhood we lived in, what restaurants we frequented. At first, I found it charming, his attention to detail, his desire to build a nice life. But over time, I started to notice that his concern wasn't just about quality or aesthetics. It was about image, about what people thought, about maintaining a certain status. When I suggested we skip an expensive vacation to save money for home renovations, he was genuinely upset. Not because he desperately wanted the vacation, but because we'd already told his colleagues we were going to Maui, and canceling would make it seem like we couldn't afford it. When my younger sister went through a difficult divorce, and I wanted to have her stay with us for a few months, Michael was hesitant. Not because he didn't like my sister, but because he worried about what the neighbors would think about the extra car in the driveway, the odd hours she kept as she worked through her depression. These were small things, easily rationalized. I told myself he was just proud, that he'd grown up with less and now wanted to enjoy what he'd earned, that his desire for a polished exterior didn't mean there was anything wrong with his interior character. I also noticed that Michael's support for my career had limits. He was proud when I succeeded in ways that reflected well on him, when I won an award, when I got a raise, when I was featured in an industry publication. But when my success required something from him, when I needed to work late and couldn't make dinner, when I had to travel for a conference, when I was stressed and less attentive, his enthusiasm dimmed. I remember one particular argument when I was 35. I'd been offered an incredible opportunity to lead a major rebranding project for our company, a career-defining role that would position me for a director-level promotion. But it would mean longer hours for at least 6 months, including some weekend work during crucial phases. Michael's first response wasn't congratulations. It was, "How is this going to affect us? I can't be expected to just pick up all the slack at home because you want to chase some promotion." I was stunned. I'd supported him through his own career transitions, including a year when he was trying to get his investment firm off the ground and barely contributed to household expenses. I'd picked up the slack then without complaint, but when it was my turn, suddenly it was an imposition. We fought about it for weeks. Eventually, he relented, but the damage was done. I took the project and I excelled at it, but there was a new tension in our marriage. A sense that we were keeping score, that our partnership had terms and conditions I hadn't been aware of when I signed up. By the time I turned 37, we'd settled into a routine that looked successful from the outside but felt increasingly hollow from the inside. We still went to dinner parties and smiled for photos. We still talked about eventually having kids, though we kept pushing the timeline back. We still said, "I love you" before bed, though it had started to feel more like habit than truth. And then there was the issue of my health, or more specifically, my body. I'd never been someone who obsessed over my weight, but I'd always been relatively fit. I ran a few times a week, did yoga, ate reasonably well. But as I approached 40, my metabolism changed. I gained about 15 pounds over the course of a year. Nothing dramatic, nothing that affected my health, just a natural shift in my body composition. Michael noticed. He didn't say anything directly, not at first, but I caught him glancing at my stomach when I got dressed. He started making comments about us needing to eat healthier, suggesting we join a new gym together, buying me workout clothes for my birthday instead of the jewelry I'd hinted at. One night, after we'd been intimate, he ran his hand over my hip and said, "You know, if you wanted to see a nutritionist or a personal trainer, I'd be happy to pay for it. Investment in ourselves, right?" I felt the words like a punch to the gut. I got up, went to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. Was I unacceptable now? Had my worth to him been tied to a particular body size this whole time? I didn't say anything that night. I just came back to bed and turned away from him. But something shifted in me. I started to understand that Michael's love might be more conditional than I'd wanted to believe. Still, I stayed. Because leaving seemed harder than staying. Because we had a mortgage and a dog and mutual friends and a life that would be messy to untangle. Because I kept thinking that maybe I was being too sensitive, too demanding, too unwilling to accept that all marriages have rough patches. And then, on a rainy Tuesday evening in November, 2 months after my 38th birthday, everything changed. I was driving home from a strategy session at work, running late because the meeting had gone longer than expected. It was around 7 p.m., dark already because of the time change, and the rain was coming down in sheets. Seattle rain isn't usually this aggressive, but that night it was relentless, the kind that makes your wipers almost useless even on the highest setting. I was on the highway, just 15 minutes from home, thinking about whether I had the energy to cook dinner or if I should just pick up something on the way. I remember being vaguely annoyed that Michael hadn't texted to ask if I needed him to start dinner, even though he knew I'd be late. I remember the red taillights of the car in front of me, the hypnotic swish of the windshield wipers, the Norah Jones song playing on the radio. And then I remember headlights. Bright, blinding headlights coming from the wrong direction. A semi-truck had jackknifed on the wet road 2 lanes over. The trailer swung wide, crossing the median, and the driver of the car directly in front of me slammed on their brakes. I hit my brakes too, but the road was slick and I was going too fast. My car hydroplaned, spinning sideways. The next few seconds are fragmented in my memory. The screech of metal. The sensation of being thrown sideways, then forward, then sideways again. The airbag deploying with a sound like a gunshot, glass shattering, and then an impact so violent that I felt it in every cell of my body, as if I'd been hit by a wrecking ball. And then nothing. I don't remember the ambulance arriving. I don't remember being cut out of my car. I don't remember the EMTs working on me at the scene or the frantic ride to the hospital. The next thing I remember is voices. Distant at first, like I was underwater and they were calling from the surface. Gradually, the voices got clearer. I heard someone say blood pressure dropping and someone else say keep her stable, and then I heard a voice I recognized, though it sounded strange, tight with stress. Michael. Is she going to make it? A calm, professional voice responded. We're doing everything we can. The next 48 hours are critical. I tried to open my eyes, tried to speak, tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt panic rising in my chest. Was I paralyzed? Was I dying? I fought against the darkness, but it pulled me back under. I learned later that I'd been in surgery for 7 hours. The impact had shattered my pelvis in 3 places. Both of my legs were broken, the left femur, the right tibia and fibula. I had 4 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and significant bruising to my spinal cord. The trauma surgeon later told me that I was lucky to be alive, that if the angle of impact had been slightly different, I would have died on the scene. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was darkness, punctuated by brief moments of semi-consciousness where I heard voices and felt pain. So much pain that it didn't feel real, like it was happening to someone else's body. I was in a medically induced coma for 3 days while the swelling in my spine went down, and my body stabilized enough for the doctors to assess the full extent of the damage. When they finally brought me out of the coma, it was like surfacing from the bottom of a deep, dark ocean. Everything was blurry, everything hurt. I could hear the beeping of machines, the hiss of oxygen, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on the linoleum floor, and I could hear voices. A doctor was speaking, his tone measured and serious. Mr. Harrison, I want to be honest with you about your wife's condition. The injuries to her pelvis and legs are severe. We've stabilized her, but the recovery process will be long and difficult. The bruising to her spinal cord is our biggest concern. We won't know the full extent of the neurological damage until the swelling goes down completely, but there's a possibility that she may have permanent mobility issues. In the worst-case scenario, she may not walk again. There was a long silence. I tried to speak, to let them know I was awake, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube, and only a small croak came out. Then I heard Michael's voice. It was flat, emotionless. What's the timeline for knowing if she'll walk or not? The doctor responded. It could be weeks, possibly months. We'll begin physical therapy as soon as she's stable enough, but these things take time. She's going to need extensive care, probably inpatient rehabilitation for several months, and then ongoing support at home. Another silence. Longer this time. I see, Michael said. Thank you, doctor. I heard footsteps walking away, and then I felt a presence at my bedside. I managed to open my eyes just a slit. The fluorescent lights were painfully bright. I could see the blurry outline of Michael standing there, looking down at me. Michael, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't move closer. He didn't take my hand. He just stood there, his face unreadable. Awake, he said. Not a question, not a relief, just a statement of fact. Happened, I managed to ask. You were in a car accident. You're in the ICU. You've been here for 5 days. 5 days. It felt like I'd been gone for minutes or maybe years. Time had no meaning. I tried to reach for him, but my arm wouldn't move properly. There were tubes everywhere, and the pain when I shifted even slightly was excruciating. Michael, I'm scared, I whispered. He nodded. I need to step out for a minute. I'll be back. He left. And I lay there, alone, terrified, in more pain than I'd ever experienced, wondering why my husband seemed so distant, so cold. He came back about 20 minutes later, and he wasn't alone. There was another man with him, older, in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase. My mind was foggy from the pain medication, and I couldn't quite make sense of what I was seeing. Michael approached the bed. The other man stood a few feet back, professional and detached. Sophia, Michael said, I need you to focus for a minute. This is David Chen. He's an attorney. An attorney? Why would Michael bring an attorney to the ICU? Michael cleared his throat. I'm going to be honest with you because I don't see the point in dragging this out. The doctor told me you might not walk again. He told me you're going to need months, maybe years of care. And I can't do this. The words didn't make sense at first. My brain couldn't process them through the haze of medication and pain and disbelief. Can't. Do what? I whispered. Us. I can't spend the next however many years taking care of an invalid. That's not what I signed up for. Room tilted. Or maybe I was tilting. I couldn't tell. What are you saying? I asked, though some part of me already knew. He reached into the briefcase the lawyer was holding and pulled out a folder. He opened it and set it on the hospital tray table, sliding it toward me. I'm saying I want a divorce, he said. David has drawn up the papers. I'm filing on the grounds of irretrievable breakdown. I think it's better to do this now, while you're already dealing with everything else rather than dragging it out. Better. He thought it was better to divorce me while I was lying broken in an ICU bed because I might be paralyzed. I stared at the papers, the words swimming in and out of focus. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Respondent, Sophia Marie Harrison. Divorcing me, I whispered. Right now. I've thought about this carefully, he said, his voice taking on the same tone he used when explaining investment strategies to clients. Medically, you're going to have expenses I can't afford to be tied to. The house is in both our names, but I'll buy out your half. You'll keep your retirement accounts, and I'll keep mine. Community property will be divided equitably. David has laid it all out. I couldn't breathe. The machines around me started beeping more frantically. Michael, I almost died, I said, my voice breaking. I'm lying here. I don't even know if I'll ever walk again, and you're leaving me? For just a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or discomfort, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Sorry, Sophia, I really am, but I have to think about my future. I can't sacrifice my entire life because of your accident. That wouldn't be fair to me. Fair to him. My husband of 7 years, the man who had promised in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, was standing in my ICU room talking about what was fair to him. The lawyer stepped forward, pulling a pen from his pocket. If you're able to sign, Mrs. Harrison, we can process these immediately. If not, we can wait until you're more recovered, but Mr. Harrison wanted to move forward as quickly as possible. I looked at the pen, at the papers, at Michael's face, which was carefully blank, revealing nothing, and then I started laughing. It hurt so much to laugh with broken ribs that I started crying too, but I couldn't stop. The absurdity of it, the cruelty, the sheer audacity of this moment, it was too much. A nurse rushed in, alerted by the machines. What's going on here? Mrs. Harrison, you need to stay calm. She looked at Michael and the lawyer. Who are you? What are you doing? Her husband, Michael said. And this is our attorney. We're just discussing some paperwork. Nurse looked at the divorce papers on my tray table and her expression hardened. Get out, she said. Both of you, right now. Have a legal right, the lawyer began. I don't care what you think your rights are. This woman is in critical condition. Get out of this room before I call security. Michael picked up the folder, his jaw tight. Fine, Sophia, we'll finish this when you're more stable. And then they left. The nurse came to my side, checking my vitals, adjusting my medications. Honey, she said softly, I've been a nurse for 23 years. I've seen a lot of things, but that might be the worst thing I've ever witnessed. I couldn't respond. I just closed my eyes and let the tears stream down my face. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. Darker than the coma, darker than the moment of impact, darker than anything I'd experienced before or since. The physical pain was constant and overwhelming. Every breath hurt because of my broken ribs. Every tiny movement sent shockwaves of agony through my shattered pelvis. The legs I couldn't feel properly terrified me more than the ones that hurt, because at least pain meant the nerves were still working. But the emotional pain was worse. Because physical pain has a logic to it, you're injured, so you hurt. Emotional pain from betrayal, from abandonment, from realizing the person you trusted most in the world sees you as a burden to discard, that pain doesn't make sense. It violates the fundamental assumptions you've built your life on. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the flat tone of Michael's voice, the way he'd brought a lawyer to my bedside like he was serving me with a parking ticket. The words, I can't spend the next however many years taking care of an invalid. Invalid, that's what I was to him, not his wife, not the person he'd promised to love forever. An invalid, a liability, a problem to be solved through legal paperwork. My mother flew in from Phoenix the day after the divorce papers incident. She walked into my room, took one look at my face, and burst into tears. Baby girl, she said, pulling a chair close to my bed and taking my hand carefully, mindful of the IV. Your sister told me what Michael did. I don't even have words. I tried to hold it together, but seeing my mother's face, the anger and heartbreak and fierce protective love there, broke something open in me. I sobbed so hard I thought I might crack my ribs all over again. "Mom, I don't understand," I cried. "How could he do this? We've been together for almost 10 years. How could he just walk away?" My mother's jaw tightened. "Because he's a coward and a selfish bastard, that's how. And honey, I know you loved him, but I have to tell you something. I never trusted him. Not completely." I looked at her in shock. "You never said anything." "Because you loved him, and you seemed happy, and what mother wants to poison her daughter's marriage with unfounded suspicions?" She squeezed my hand gently. "But there was always something about him that felt conditional. Like he loved the idea of you, the successful, smart, beautiful wife version of you, more than he loved you as a person." Her words hit me because they were true. Michael had loved the version of me that fit into his life plan. The healthy, attractive, professionally successful wife who made him look good at company events and didn't require too much from him. But the version of me lying broken in a hospital bed, facing months of painful recovery and an uncertain future, that version didn't fit his plan, so he was discarding me. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. "Even if I can walk again, the recovery is going to take months. I can't work. I can't take care of myself. And now I'm going to be divorced, and I'll have to deal with selling the house and splitting everything while I'm trying to just survive each day." "You're going to come stay with me," my mother said firmly. "In Phoenix. As soon as the doctors say you can travel, I'm taking you home. Your sister and I will take care of you. And you're going to heal, baby. Your body and your heart. You're going to heal." I wanted to believe her. But lying in that hospital bed, in more pain than I'd known was possible, facing the reality that I might never walk again, and that my husband had abandoned me at my lowest point, healing seemed impossible. The hospital's social worker came to see me a few days later. Her name was Patricia, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Sophia, I've reviewed your case," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "I want to talk about your recovery plan and your support system." I laughed bitterly. My support system just filed for divorce. She nodded, her expression sympathetic but professional. "I saw that in your chart. I'm sorry, but we need to think practically. You're looking at a minimum of 2 months in inpatient rehabilitation once you're stable enough to leave the ICU. After that, you'll need extensive outpatient physical therapy, probably for 6 to 12 months. You won't be able to live alone during the initial recovery phase." "My mother wants me to move to Phoenix," I said. "That could work. Do you have disability insurance through your employer?" "Yes." "Good. That will cover part of your income while you're unable to work. But you need to file the claim immediately. You also need to think about health insurance. If you're divorcing, you'll lose coverage under your husband's plan." The practicalities were overwhelming. I'd gone from being a successful professional with a stable life to being someone who couldn't even go to the bathroom without help, facing months of painful recovery, a divorce, financial uncertainty, and the possibility that I might never fully recover. I started having panic attacks. They would hit me at random times, in the middle of the night, during physical therapy assessments, when doctors came in to discuss my progress. My heart would race, my breathing would become shallow and fast, and I'd feel like I was drowning. The hospital assigned me a psychologist, Dr. Monica Foster. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with curly black hair and a direct way of speaking that I appreciated. "You're dealing with trauma on multiple levels," she explained during our first session. "Physical trauma from the accident, medical trauma from the hospitalizations and procedures, and emotional trauma from your husband's betrayal. It's completely normal to feel overwhelmed." "I don't feel overwhelmed," I told her. "I feel broken, like I'll never be whole again." "Let me ask you something," Dr. Foster said. "Before the accident, were you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know, I thought I was. But looking back now, I think I was just comfortable. Or maybe I'd convinced myself that comfortable was the same as happy. "And your marriage?" I thought about it honestly. It was dying, I admitted. Slowly, I just didn't want to see it. Sometimes, Dr. Foster said carefully, a crisis reveals truths we've been avoiding. I'm not saying the accident was a good thing, it absolutely wasn't. But maybe what your husband did, as cruel and heartless as it was, revealed who he really was. Maybe it saved you from wasting more years on someone who was never going to be your true partner. I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to defend Michael, to say she didn't understand that we'd had good times too. But I couldn't, because she was right. That doesn't make it hurt less, I said quietly. No, she agreed. It doesn't. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel all of it. But don't let his betrayal define your recovery. Don't give him that much power over your future. I was transferred to an inpatient rehabilitation facility 6 weeks after the accident. By that point, I'd had 3 surgeries, 2 to reconstruct my pelvis, and 1 to place rods and pins in my left leg. The pain was still intense, but it had become a familiar companion, something I'd learned to breathe through. The rehab facility was both better and worse than the hospital. Better because it felt less like a place where people went to die and more like a place where people went to fight. Worse because every day confronted me with the reality of how much I'd lost and how hard it would be to get it back. My roommate for the first 2 weeks was a woman named Carol, in her 60s, recovering from a stroke. Half her face didn't move properly, and she struggled to speak clearly, but she had a fierce determination that I admired. "Young lady," she told me on my first day, her words slightly slurred but understandable, "you've got 2 choices here. You can feel sorry for yourself or you can fight like hell. Both are understandable, but only one will get you home." The physical therapy was brutal. My PT, a woman named Jessica, who was probably the toughest person I'd ever met, didn't believe in coddling. "I know it hurts," she'd say when I'd cry during sessions, "but the only way out is through. If you want to walk again, you have to push through pain that would make most people quit. So the question is, how badly do you want it?" How badly did I want it? More than anything. Because every step I couldn't take, every movement I couldn't make, felt like Michael winning. It felt like proving him right that I was an invalid, a burden, someone not worth fighting for. So I fought. I fought through exercises that left me shaking and sobbing. I fought through the humiliation of needing help with basic tasks like bathing and dressing. I fought through the fear every time they asked me to put weight on my legs, terrified they wouldn't hold me. The first time I stood, supported by parallel bars and 2 therapists, was 7 weeks after the accident. I was upright for maybe 30 seconds before my legs gave out and I collapsed into the wheelchair, but Jessica was grinning like I'd just run a marathon. "That's it," she shouted. "That's what I'm talking about. You stood, Sophia, you stood." I was crying, but they were tears of something other than pain for the first time in weeks. They were tears of hope. Meanwhile, the divorce was proceeding. Michael's lawyer sent paperwork to the rehab facility. Michael himself never visited, never called. He communicated only through his attorney, treating the dissolution of our marriage like a business transaction. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Angela Martinez, who my mother had found, was outraged. "He's trying to lowball you on every asset," she told me during one of her visits to the rehab facility. "He's claiming financial hardship because of his business debts, which is bullshit. I've seen his financial records. He's doing fine." "I don't care," I said tiredly. "I just want it over. Give him whatever he wants. I just want to be done with him." "Sophia, no. You're entitled to half of the marital assets. You need that money for your medical expenses, for your recovery, for your future." She was right, of course. But fighting with Michael felt like holding on to something I desperately wanted to let go of. In the end, Angela negotiated a settlement that was fair if not generous. I got my retirement accounts, half the equity in the house, and half of our savings. Michael got the house, his business, and the satisfaction of exiting our marriage without having to deal with any of the messy reality of my recovery. The divorce was finalized 3 months after the accident. I signed the final papers in the rehab facility, witnessed by a notary who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Congratulations," she said awkwardly when it was done. "You're officially divorced." I stared at my signature on the papers. Sophia Marie Harrison. Soon I'd go back to my maiden name, Sophia Marie Bennett, like the marriage had never happened, like those 10 years had been erased. "Are you okay?" Carol asked me that night. She was getting ready to be discharged the next day, excited to go home to her grandchildren. "I'm free," I said. "That's what everyone keeps telling me, that I'm free of him, free to start over." "But you don't feel free." "I feel empty, like someone reached inside me and scooped out all the parts that made me who I was. My marriage, my career, my independence, my body, it's all gone or changed. And I don't know who I am without those things." Carol reached across from her bed and took my hand with her good one. "Then you get to figure it out," she said. "You get to decide who you are now, not who you were, who you are now. That's a gift, honey, even if it doesn't feel like one yet." I moved to Phoenix 4 months after the accident. I could walk with a walker by then, though not far and not without pain. The doctors were cautiously optimistic that I'd eventually walk unassisted, but they warned me it would take time, possibly years, and I'd likely always have some limitations and chronic pain. My mother's house became my recovery center. She'd converted her home office into a bedroom for me, installing grab bars in the bathroom and rearranging furniture to accommodate my walker and eventual wheelchair when I was too tired to stand. My sister Emma, who lived 20 minutes away, came over almost every day. She'd sit with me during my home physical therapy sessions, cheering me on when I managed to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen without stopping, distracting me with gossip and stories about her kids when the pain was too much. "I'm so glad you're here," she told me one afternoon while helping me through stretches. "I know the circumstances are horrible, but I've missed you. You were so far away in Seattle, living your perfect life." "It wasn't perfect," I said quietly. "I just made it look that way." "I know that now, but from the outside you had everything. The career, the house, the husband. Meanwhile, I was the family disappointment with 2 kids and a divorce by 35. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was beautiful, strong, raising 2 incredible kids on her own, working full-time as a nurse, and she thought she was a disappointment. "Emma, you're the strongest person I know," I said. "You're not a disappointment, you never were." She smiled sadly. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both divorced, both figuring out how to rebuild." But we were different in one crucial way. Emma had chosen to leave her marriage because it was unhealthy. I'd been abandoned in mine. That distinction mattered to me more than I wanted to admit. The setbacks were frequent and demoralizing. Some days I'd make progress, walk a little farther, stand a little longer, need a little less pain medication. And then I'd have a bad day where everything hurt worse, where my body refused to cooperate, where the trauma of the accident would replay in my mind in vivid detail. I developed a fear of cars that bordered on phobia. The first time I had to ride in a car to go to a doctor's appointment, I had a full panic attack. Emma had to pull over and hold me while I hyperventilated and cried. "I can't do it," I sobbed. "I can't get back in. What if we crash? What if it happens again?" "We're going 5 minutes down the road to a doctor's office," Emma said gently. "And I'm a very careful driver, but I understand you're scared. How about we just sit here for a while? No pressure." We sat in that parking lot for 45 minutes before I could calm down enough to continue the short drive. I was late to my appointment, and I felt ridiculous, but Dr. Foster, who I was still seeing remotely via video sessions, assured me that my reaction was completely normal. "Trauma doesn't follow a logical timeline," she explained. "Some days you'll feel strong, and some days you'll feel broken. Both are part of the healing process." 6 months after the accident, I took my first steps without the walker. Just across the living room, and I had to sit down immediately after because my legs were shaking so badly. "But I did it," my mother cried. Emma whooped and called our dad, who lived in Florida, to tell him the news. And I sat on the couch, overwhelmed by the simple achievement of walking 15 feet unassisted. That night, alone in my room, I looked at myself in the mirror. I'd lost weight during the recovery, not in a healthy way, but from the trauma and the pain and the stress. I had scars now, surgical scars crisscrossing my abdomen and legs, mapping the damage that had been done and the attempts to repair it. My body didn't look like it had before. It probably never would, but I was standing, on my own 2 feet, looking at myself without support. "Hi," I said to my reflection. "I'm Sophia. I'm 38 years old. I'm divorced. I'm a car accident survivor. I'm learning to walk again, and I have no idea who I'm going to be a year from now." It felt like an introduction to myself, to whoever I was becoming. I moved into my own apartment in Phoenix when I was 9 months post-accident. It was a small one-bedroom in a complex with an elevator and covered parking, both non-negotiables given my mobility limitations. I'd used part of my divorce settlement for the security deposit and first few months' rent, and I'd started applying for remote jobs that I could do from home. The independence terrified me and exhilarated me in equal measure. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly alone. No husband, no roommates, no family members in the next room. Just me. The first night in my apartment, I ordered pizza and sat on my new couch, the only furniture I'd bought so far, and looked around at the empty space. I could make this anything I wanted. There was no one to tell me the couch was the wrong color, or that I should have chosen a different neighborhood, or that my career plans didn't fit their timeline. I started crying, but this time they weren't tears of pain or grief. They were tears of possibility. I got a job 3 weeks later as a remote marketing consultant for a startup based in Austin. The work was interesting, the hours were flexible, and my new boss, a woman named Rachel, was understanding about my situation. "I had a serious injury a few years ago," she told me during the interview. "I know what it's like to rebuild everything from scratch. If you need to adjust your schedule for PT appointments or bad pain days, just let me know. We'll make it work." Having work again felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd thought was gone. I wasn't just a car accident victim or a divorced woman or someone learning to walk again. I was a professional with skills and value and contributions to make. But the emotional healing was slower and more complicated than the physical healing. I went on a few dates during that first year back, and they were disasters. I felt awkward and damaged, convinced that anyone who learned about my accident and my limitations would run like Michael had. And honestly, some of them did. One guy, Tom, seemed great until I mentioned I still had some mobility limitations from the accident. He literally said, "Oh, I'm looking for someone more active. I like to hike and travel and stuff, but good luck with everything." Another man, David, was sweet until the topic of my divorce came up. When I explained what Michael had done, his response was, "Wow, that's heavy. I'm kind of looking for something lighter right now." I stopped dating after that. It felt pointless. Dr. Foster and I talked about it in one of our sessions. "You're trying to date from a place of scarcity," she observed. "Like you're damaged goods and you should be grateful for any attention. That's not true, Sophia." "I am damaged," I said. "Literally. I have scars. I walk with a limp. I have chronic pain. I can't do a lot of physical activities I used to do. What man is going to want to deal with all that?" "A good one," she said simply. "A real one. Someone who sees all of you and values all of you, not just the convenient parts. But you won't find that person until you believe you deserve them." I was 39 when I started really processing what had happened to me. Not just the accident and the divorce, but the patterns that had led me there. The way I'd ignored red flags with Michael because I wanted the relationship to work. The way I'd prioritized external markers of success, the right job, the right house, the right marriage, over internal satisfaction and growth. I started journaling, something I'd never done before. Pages and pages of thoughts and feelings and questions. Who was I before I defined myself as Michael's wife? What did I actually want from life versus what I thought I was supposed to want? I joined a support group for trauma survivors. It met weekly in a community center, a circle of people with different stories but similar wounds. There was Marcus, who'd been in a motorcycle accident that left him with a traumatic brain injury. There was Linda, who'd survived domestic violence. There was James, who'd been shot during a robbery at the convenience store where he worked. Listening to their stories, I realized that trauma is a universal experience. The details differ, but the core challenge is the same. How do you go on living when something has broken you open and revealed how fragile everything really is? "The secret," Linda told the group one night, "is that you don't go back to who you were before. You can't. That person didn't survive. You become someone new, someone who knows how dark it can get and chooses to keep going anyway." I turned 40 in the support group meeting room. My mother had wanted to throw me a party, but I'd asked for something quieter. So instead, she brought a cake to the meeting, and these people, these survivors who'd become my unlikely community, sang happy birthday to me. 40, Marcus said, grinning. Welcome to middle age. Feel ancient, I admitted. When I was younger, I thought I'd have everything figured out by now. Marriage, kids, career, the whole package. Instead, Linda asked. Instead, I'm divorced, childless, working a job I like but never planned for, living alone in a city I never expected to live in, and still in physical therapy for an accident that changed everything. You're saying life didn't go according to plan, James said, laughing. Welcome to being human. He was right, of course. I'd spent so much time mourning the life I'd planned that I hadn't fully appreciated the life I was actually living. Which, despite everything, had moments of beauty and connection and growth. I saw Michael again 18 months after the accident. I was back in Seattle for a work conference, my first time flying since the accident, which was its own challenge. The conference was in downtown Seattle, just a few miles from the neighborhood where Michael and I had lived together. I wasn't planning to see him. I wasn't planning to think about him. But on the second day of the conference, during a lunch break, I decided to walk to a coffee shop I'd loved when I lived in the city. I was in line, waiting to order when I heard a familiar laugh. I turned and saw him at a table near the window. Michael. With a woman, she was young, maybe late 20s, pretty in a polished way. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm, looking at him with obvious affection. My first instinct was to leave. To walk out before he saw me, to avoid the confrontation, to protect myself from whatever feelings this encounter might bring up. But then something shifted in me. I realized I didn't want to run. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't devastated by him anymore. I was just curious. I got my coffee and walked directly to his table. Hello, Michael, I said. He looked up and I watched his face cycle through emotions. Surprise, guilt, discomfort, and then a forced politeness. Sophia, wow, hi, what are you doing in Seattle? Work conference, I said. I'm a marketing consultant now. Oh, that's great. You look good. I did look good. I'd put effort into it this morning, a professional dress that I liked, careful makeup, my hair styled. But more than that, I'd gained weight back in a healthy way. I stood straighter. I moved with more confidence, even though I still walked with a slight limp. Thank you, I said. I looked at the woman with him. I don't mean to interrupt. I just saw you and wanted to say hello. This is Amanda, Michael said uncomfortably. My fiancé, so he'd moved on quickly. Of course he had. Congratulations, I said to Amanda. I meant it sincerely. She looked between us, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Thank you. Have you two worked together or? We're married, I said simply. We divorced about a year and a half ago. Amanda's eyes widened. Oh, Michael, you didn't mention your ex-wife lived in Seattle. I don't, I said. I live in Phoenix now. I'm just visiting. There was an awkward silence. Michael was staring at his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. Well, I should get back to my conference, I said. It was nice meeting you, Amanda. Michael, take care. I started to walk away, and then Michael called my name. Sophia, wait. I turned back. He stood up, leaving Amanda at the table. Can we talk, just for a minute? I should have said no. I should have walked away, but I found myself nodding. We stepped outside the coffee shop, standing on the sidewalk in the drizzle that's perpetual in Seattle. You look really good, he said again. Are you? Are you okay? Did you ever? Can you walk okay? I can walk, I said. I have some chronic pain and some mobility limitations, but I'm functional, independent, living on my own, he nodded, looking relieved, as if my recovery absolved him of guilt. Sophia, I want to apologize, he said, for how I handled things, for the timing. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I made a terrible decision. I studied his face. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, and I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no grief, no longing, just a distant pity for who he was. Michael, do you know why I'm not angry at you anymore? I asked. He looked surprised. You're not? No, because you did me a favor. If you'd stayed, if you'd pretended to be supportive while resenting me, that would have been worse. You showed me exactly who you are in the clearest way possible, and that freed me to become who I am now. Are you now? He asked quietly. Someone who knows her worth, I said. Someone who doesn't need another person to validate her existence. Someone who's stronger than she ever thought possible. So thank you, actually, for leaving. It was the best, worst thing that ever happened to me. I left him standing there on the sidewalk and walked back to my conference. My leg ached. It always did when the weather was damp, but I barely noticed. Because for the first time since the accident, since the divorce, since everything fell apart, I felt completely whole. I'm 40 years old now, and my life looks nothing like I thought it would. I'm not married. I don't have children. I don't live in a beautiful craftsman house with a big backyard. I don't have the career trajectory I once imagined. Instead, I live in a small apartment in Phoenix that I've filled with plants and books and art that makes me happy. I work remotely for a company I believe in, doing work that challenges and fulfills me. I have chronic pain that I manage with physical therapy and medication and acceptance. I have scars that map the journey my body has taken. I have a limp that's more noticeable when I'm tired, but doesn't stop me from doing what I want to do. I also have my family closer than they've been in years. I have a community of survivors who understand what it means to rebuild from wreckage. I have a therapist I trust and a physical therapist who's become a friend. I have a life that's mine, not dictated by someone else's expectations or timeline. And here's what I've learned. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you cracks you open and reveals who you really are underneath all the roles and expectations you've been performing. That ICU room, as horrible as it was, showed me the truth. Not just about Michael, but about myself. I'd been so focused on maintaining the appearance of a successful life that I'd forgotten to check whether I was actually happy. I'd been so invested in my marriage that I'd overlooked how conditional Michael's love was. I'd defined myself by external achievements and relationships rather than by internal growth and self-knowledge. The accident and its aftermath, the pain, the abandonment, the long recovery, forced me to strip away everything I thought I was and figure out who I actually am. And it turns out, I'm someone I actually like. Someone resilient and brave and kind and honest. Someone who knows what she deserves and won't settle for less. Would I choose to go through it all again? No, the accident was traumatic, the betrayal was devastating, the recovery was brutal. But would I trade who I am now to go back to who I was before? Also no. Because the woman I was before was living a half-life, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't, accepting crumbs of affection from someone who saw her as an accessory rather than a partner. And the woman I am now knows better. I don't know what my future holds. Maybe I'll fall in love again with someone who understands that real commitment means showing up when things are hard, not just when they're easy. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll change careers again, or move to a new city, or finally write that book I've been thinking about. Maybe I'll do none of those things. But whatever happens, I'll face it as myself, scarred and limping and stronger than I ever imagined possible. And that's enough. If you've been through something that broke you, whether it's an accident or a betrayal or a loss that changed everything, I want you to know this. You're allowed to grieve what you lost. You're allowed to be angry at what was taken from you. You're allowed to take as long as you need to heal. But please don't let what happened to you define what happens next. Don't let someone else's failure to love you properly convince you that you're unlovable. Don't let a moment of trauma determine the rest of your story. You get to write what comes next. You get to decide who you become in the aftermath. And you might discover, like I did, that the person you become is someone you never could have been without first being broken open. That ICU room was supposed to be the worst moment of my life, and in many ways, it was. But it was also the beginning of my real life. The one where I stopped performing and started being. The one where I learned that I don't need anyone to complete me because I was never incomplete to begin with. So here I am, Sophia Bennett, 40 years old, survivor, strong, whole, free. And I wouldn't have it any other way.